Hello and welcome to episode 77 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. It's our 6th annual Holiday Spooktacular, and this year we're going in a slightly different direction. Instead of our usual horror flick, we're watching Tim Burton's 1994 movie Ed Wood, the film about a man who tried making scary pictures, made by a man who always sort of creeps people out. We haven't seen this movie in a while, but we were glad to have a chance to celebrate its 25th anniversary by watching it again.
In the spirit of Ed Wood, the filmmaker, Ed Wood, the film, didn't make even a third of its budget back at the box office. Critics mostly liked the film, and the film earned 2 Oscars, one for Martin Landau as Best Supporting Actor and one for Best Makeup, which completed Landau's transformation into Bela Lugosi. It was the second of many collaborations between Johnny Depp and Tim Burton, and for Depp, it was one more step further away from his reputation as a teen heartthrob. For Burton, it continued to establish him as a talented, though quirky, filmmaker who could tell stories of endearing outsiders.
But does quirk get you very far in this town anymore?
Or is Ed Wood so bad it's just bad? Keep listening.
You couldn't tell me on the phone again?
Well, I started thinking about what you were saying, about how your movies need to make a profit. Now, what is the one thing, if you put it in a movie, it'll be successful?
Tits.
No, better than that. A star.
Ed, you must have me confused with David Selznick. I don't make major motion pictures. I make crap.
Yes, but if you take that crap and put a star in it, then you've got something.
Yeah, crap with a star.
No, something better. Something impressive. Maybe the biggest moneymaker you've ever had.
Fine, all right. You may be right, but it doesn't frickin' matter. I can't afford a star, so what are we even talking about?
All right. What if I told you you could have a star for $1,000?
Who? Lugosi?
Yes, Lugosi.
Isn't he dead?
No, he's not dead. He lives in Baldwin Hills. I met him recently, and he really wants to be in our movie.
Why would Lugosi...
All right, that is a clip from the movie we are discussing for our 6th annual Holiday Spooktacular. Happy holidays, Ryan.
Happy holidays to you and yours.
And so in the clip, we have Johnny Depp playing the titular, as you said last time, character of this movie, Ed Wood. And he's pitching his next feature, or he's pitching...
His first?
I think he's pitching just wanting to be hired for a script that's kind of floating around this B-movie studio.
Or Z movie.
Headed by a guy named Georgie, starring Mike Starr, who you may remember from Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber, yeah. If that guy, he probably doesn't get recognized for anything else.
Than Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah.
In fact, I think his name is like Joe in Dumb and Dumber.
Probably.
And he's Georgie here. So.
And I think they eat angrily, like in the same way. So
Anyways, he's pitching that he should be the one to direct what eventually becomes Glenn or Glenda, and that he's got a star.
Yeah,
Bela Lugosi,
who was not quite a star at that point anymore. Who would that be now? Like, I feel like in the 90s, and I think in film history, you kind of understand a little bit about Bela Lugosi and the difference between Dracula Bela Lugosi and then like junkie Bela Lugosi.
Sure, yeah.
Is there anybody now you think that it would be analogous to?
Wow, you're catching me off guard here.
I know.
I don't know.
I didn't.
You mean someone who's sort of like a star because they were something like Dracula or something,
right?
Like
well,
a character
something like
they played.
that, where like you could see somebody's. If there was another Ed Wood who was just super impressed with. I think Quentin Tarantino's actually done it successfully.
Yeah. let me make this case.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Okay.
Not anymore. But for a while, you could have said that about Michael Keaton with Batman, and then it wasn't until Birdman that his career was kind of resurrected with Iñárritu.
Yeah, and then that kind of jump-started things.
Yeah, because then after Birdman, it was like Spotlight. Maybe not as drastic, because I don't think he was, on drugs or anything like that, like Bela Lugosi.
One that kind of comes to mind, with the exception of Boogie Nights, is Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
Who, after Boogie Nights, he could have kind of gone on, but he ended up not. And then if you look at Burt Reynolds' like last 10 years of movies, it's like, oh, wow, that's kind of sad. And I think aside from Community, you could say that maybe about Chevy Chase too.
Yeah, and I think what's common about Lugosi, Reynolds, and Chevy Chase, not so much Michael Keaton, but the three that you just, the two you mentioned plus Bela Lugosi, is they seem to be kind of their own worst enemies.
Right.
Like people like their idea of them, and for whatever reason, it just seems like whether it's they're hard to work with, or it seems like for whatever reason, Hollywood doesn't really seem to like them or want them to come back.
Yeah, it seems like they've been given chances, like Boogie Nights, like Community, and then didn't quite take the hint. Yeah, maybe Burt Reynolds is our guy.
Is your guy. All right. Well, by the way, something that is definitely very spooky is the haunting sound of your voice right now. Which I think we need to let people know so they're not like too freaked out.
Well, I'm working on my Orson Welles impression.
Yeah. How's it going?
You tell me.
I mean,
I got a deeper voice. Yeah.
Yeah. My idea of Orson Welles impression is not the brain from Animaniacs. It's the Orson Welles commercial they did where he was selling fish sticks. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Animaniacs. How did they? How did they make that show popular to kids?
And I was like, I had no clue. I had no clue who
show.
Orson Welles was, and I still thought that was so funny.
Yeah,
whoever this guy is, they're doing a great job parodying.
And they had a song that had Mickey Rooney in it, and I would sing that. I'm like, I don't know who Mickey Rooney is.
George Wendt and Beans. Yeah. I mean, now I get that. That's pretty funny, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so I do have a spooky voice. You kind of
chilling.
You also kind of have the same.
I'm getting over it though. I think I'm further along than you are in that.
This is also a Can We Still Be Friends tradition.
Yeah,
me having a sick sounding voice,
but it never stops us.
No,
the show must go on.
People say it should. People say makes it hard to listen to.
Gotta turn the bass down on the stereo.
It's a little gross. We say we are professionals.
I'll say it once and I'll say it again. The show must go on. And I think I'm the only person who's ever said that because we are that dedicated to the show. You've coined that
phrase, yes. Yeah. Like we say, 'tis the season.
'Tis the season. And so, I thought I wanted to wait until we got a little bit into the episode to talk about it because I thought this is great. We're actually scaring people right now.
Yeah, right. Like let's
and then I was like, all right.
Up.
It's a little too tense. Let's just, kind of pull back the curtain.
Yeah.
That's all it is, guys.
Yep.
Ryan just has a little cold.
Just illness.
Calm down.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
And now we should probably get into our episode.
We probably should. All right. Everybody's relaxed now. Take a breath.
So let's talk a little bit about the movie Ed Wood before we maybe get into the person of Ed Wood and how he is portrayed here.
Yeah.
What's your experience with Ed Wood, the movie?
Well, I own this movie, and I'm not entirely certain why. And I saw it... Yeah, probably in college. It's not a very remarkable story. I saw it. I've seen it a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like every time I've seen it, I've liked it a little bit less each time.
Okay. So you didn't see it when it came out because this is 25 years.
Yeah,
94.
No.
You weren't seeing it in 94.
No.
College would be like mid-2000s-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
4-star Letterboxd rating.
That was what it was. Well, okay, then that's a simple enough story. I don't think mine's all that different, really. I did not see this when it came out. I do remember seeing... commercials for it though, and I think I even watched the original Siskel and Ebert review of this movie.
Yeah, I feel like I remember a lot about it when it came out.
Yeah, what was weird to me at the time, even as a kid, was that it was a contemporary movie, but it was black and white.
Yeah,
and so I didn't really hear much about it afterwards until that period that you're kind of talking about when you're getting into film in college and post college, and you're trying to catch up. It wasn't like there was any top 10 list that said I needed to see it. It was just sort of one of those where it's like, I've always been a Tim Burton fan. I never saw this movie. I think it's kind of an interesting story, So I just checked it out from the library and watched it on my own, I think. And I really liked it. I've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times since then before our rewatch here, but I was also a 4-star on Letterboxd.
Okay. Now that you mention it, I do remember, I feel like at the time I saw that. I don't know how I got so much information about movies as a kid.
Isn't that weird?
What I think it was we were a Good Morning America family. So I think his name was Joel Siegel, was the film guy for Good Morning America, and he always did film reviews. And they like back when those morning shows,
they had them in there.
Did like film reviews and like other things.
I remember this
instead of just what's trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I remember him talking about it, and then he would do Oscar stuff and whatever. So I remember like Martin Landau specifically, him talking about that. Also, this was 94, so that was, I apparently paid a ton of attention to the Oscars that year. That was the Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump year. But yeah, so it's weird how like when I finally saw this movie, I feel like I've seen so many of these scenes.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
We were a CBS This Morning family.
What?
And the reason
nobody was a CBS This Morning family.
My family was. We were the odd ones. But
I didn't even know CBS had a show.
It had Harry Smith and Paula Zahn.
Oh, Paula Zahn. I know that name.
Paula Zahn? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you weren't. Maybe nobody did watch CBS This Morning, but I am almost positive, and I could be wrong. People can fact check me on this, but I think Gene Siskel, his TV spot was CBS This Morning.
I think it was.
And so I always have his memory, even if I didn't catch the Siskel and Ebert section, I did catch Siskel's segment on CBS This Morning. But yeah, now that you mention it, I kind of miss that from those morning shows where you would just have a critic come on and say, this is what you should see this weekend,
Right. I don't know what they do. I don't watch those shows.
They don't do that.
That's too bad.
Times were different.
Yep.
And people trusted each other.
Yep.
And they laughed. They don't do that anymore.
Anyway, so we've rewatched the film, as is our tradition.
Mm-hmm. Not just for Spooktaculars, for all episodes.
Gosh, no. That's something we do for every episode.
We wouldn't have a show if we didn't do it.
No.
So on the rewatch, who's going first? What do you want?
I'll go first. My gut says it's dropped to a 3 for me.
Okay. I was either going to keep it at 4 or drop it to 3.5. I wasn't willing to go 3 though. I think it's better than average.
Okay.
And then again, this could even just be the moment I watched it this time. I don't even know if I'm going to blame it on the film necessarily.
Okay.
Where I just wasn't feeling it as much as I had in the past when I watched it.
That might be true for me too.
All right. Well, let's make sure we kind of frame it all within that context.
Okay.
And if we think it's just that we were in a bad mood or whatever, then we can be honest about that.
Okay.
But why don't we, I guess, start with, oftentimes we start with what we liked about the movie.
Well, maybe we should do that because I guess I feel like more than anything, I was underwhelmed. Not necessarily that I'm like actively disliking things about it.
Well, I think that for this movie, it might help to just think about what it was doing when it came out.
I wanted to ask you what you thought about that.
Because it was, I think, this period of Burton where you just have someone who's thinking differently and making Hollywood movies that are just outside the bubble. I still consider it part of that lump of Burton that I love, which is Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, pieces of the Batman movies that he was able to put himself into, and then Ed Wood. And this might actually just kind of be the end. There's other appeal factors to this as well. There's just something I love about movies that really relish and have a sort of nostalgic fondness for that period's B-moviness. And I would even put Mystery Science Theater is something that I have always loved. I still love it.
Yeah.
And even though that's all they do is make fun of these movies, they're doing it from a place that says this is culture that is valuable to some degree. And I would even put the B-52s. There's just a certain campy, kitschy culture thing that is always going to be an appeal factor to me.
And that does not automatically appeal to me. But one thing that comes to mind is just what a unique time. We'll never be back at that time. We maybe were close to that time when the internet first came out and people were in YouTube and people were able to sort of do whatever they wanted. And I think that affected comedy more than anything else, where you could find famous people, but also unknown people doing just there's no way you could get money to do this, but since it costs them no money to do it and it costs them no money to present it, you've got Will Ferrell with Pearl the Landlord. That's a concept that doesn't need to be filled out to a full thing. You don't need to have it part of a TV show. You can just put this video out there. And that was sort of what the landscape was like in Hollywood with feature movies. It was if you can get this done in this amount of time for this amount of money, then make whatever you want, because it's not going out to 2,000 theaters. We've got theaters in Oklahoma that are going to show it. and people in Oklahoma were going to go see whatever the theater was showing.
Right, at the drive-in, and they might even only pay a little bit of attention to it.
Right.
You know?
So it was just a completely different time where they did want to make money, but they didn't have as much control or as broad of a net to cast in showing movies in theaters. So they could take a risk and say, like, all right, fine. If you can do it for this amount of money, we really don't care.
Yeah.
We just want something that we can ship out.
Yeah, I think the comparison to YouTube is pretty interesting, actually, because, you know, there is sort of this lo-fi aesthetic that is just bizarre. And that's how I think even within YouTube culture, you get, you know, eventually what would end up being like Tim and Eric, you know, and like they're sort of embracing this lo-fi aesthetic as being funny in its bizarreness. It's funny because it's so bizarre.
Or Eric Andre.
And what I think is really fascinating about Ed Wood as a movie is that Tim Burton is really early on actually understanding the comedy and the feeling you can get from that bizarre lo-fi aesthetic and making a movie that is not that actually the movie.
But it's got the
feel
of it.
It has a feel
really.
of it. But it's a pretty movie to look at. The acting is good. I mean, the level of acting to where you've got people who have to play the character and then have to be the bad actor in the movie, you know?
Which is always like impressive when people can do that well.
So going back to just sort of what is good about the movie, I just think for the time, 94, Tim Burton was onto something. Even you could talk, I mean, you mentioned Pulp Fiction being 94 with Quentin Tarantino, and he was bringing back some of that sort of kitsch aesthetic into his stuff. But not to the same effect. You know, he was kind of like injecting pieces of it into a highly stylized thing.
Hog,
yeah,
which he did do later with Death Proof,
right?
And made it look like, you know, messed up the film and had like scene missing and like really wanted to recreate that experience, which is what Tim Burton is trying to do here. Like opening it with the theremin and the thunderstorm and Criswell coming out of the coffin and talking to the audience and opening credits on tombstones. Yeah.
And I think Tim Burton, that's another thing I really like about this movie, is I think he gets the feeling right. We were talking about how this is kind of an odd choice for a holiday spooktacular, but when that opening credits started and the guy in Criswell comes out of the coffin, I was like, this reminds me of watching whatever was on TV on Halloween when I was a kid. It wasn't Vampira, but it was Elvira. Yeah. And it was like Tales from the Crypt, and it was like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and old episodes of The Twilight Zone. Like, he does a really good job of evoking your sort of childhood television understanding of what Halloween is.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer. Can your heart stand the shocking facts of the true story of Edward D. Wood, Jr.?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's a Hollywood like movie, but it's so rooted in TV too.
Well, because I think in Hollywood, those types of movies were sort of at that point in the 50s relegated to B-movie type, you know, stuff. But that was also the same production value that was in television at the time.
Well, and it was about scraping by and being scrappy. Like
exactly
Ed Wood being able to make to pull a script together just from stock footage.
Yeah. And it's a bunch of outsiders. You know, a lot of what was on television were people who didn't make it in Hollywood.
Right. And couldn't afford the main movie. So what can we afford? We can afford stock footage to make this movie. Well, then that's the movie that Vampira can afford to show. And she even says, like, and a bunch of other, like, when she's talking about who stars in the movie, she's like, a bunch of other people I've never heard of. And this, I mean, not to get too lofty with it, but this movie is sort of also like a memorial to those actors, to the people who worked their whole lives acting and making no money and getting no recognition.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on what I think, big picture wise, what I really love about this movie and still love is that it is an ode. When it very easily at that time, I think a lot of other directors would have just made it a mocking of those people and a spoof. A satire, a spoof of this time, because for someone who doesn't have the right sort of instinct with that stuff, it's easy to laugh at, and that's the end of the sentence. You know, like, it's just easy to laugh at. But I feel like Tim Burton really does come at this with an affection and a love that is a testament to kind of who he is as a person. Like that he's someone who is not going to make a mean-spirited movie about this, you know? And these are outsiders. I mean, not only is Ed Wood obviously career-wise an outsider, as someone who did not make successful movies, but then it's like you dig into the characters themselves and they're a bunch of misfits.
Even if they were talented, who would have hired them?
Exactly.
And I mean, there is some humor to be found, like that the movie is mining out of his cross-dressing, but it's, for 1994 especially, it's pretty respectful of it. Mm-hmm. When he's talking to somebody about it, he's cheerful.
I have never told anyone what I'm about to tell you, but I really want this job. I like to dress in women's clothing.
You a fruit?
No, not at all. I love women. Wearing their clothes makes me feel closer to them.
You're not a fruit.
No, I'm all man. I even fought in WW2. Of course, I was wearing women's undergarments under my uniform.
You gotta be kidding me.
Confidentially, I even paratrooped wearing a brassiere and panties. I'll tell you, I wasn't scared of being killed, but I was terrified of getting wounded and having the medics discover my secret.
So you think this qualifies you to make my movie?
Yes. I know what it's like to live with a secret and worry about what people are going to think of you.
I was prepared to sort of like cringe at it, but I had forgotten that it's pretty celebratory to a degree.
And I was prepared to cringe at it too, and I was prepared to cringe at Bill Murray's character as someone who was just sort of like, it was, the punchline was that he was gay.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a level of like, it's kind of funny to see Bill Murray act effeminate, you know? But I mean, to me, the funniest part in that movie that he does has nothing to do with him being gay. It's when he's baptized, and just the way that he like kind of struggles through the water. Yeah,
it's the
physical humor of that is very funny, you know.
And how he dips his toe into the water, but he's wearing a shoe. Yeah. Kind of back to what you were saying about Tim Burton and his handling of this and his approach. This might be the closest to an autobiographical movie that we're going to get from Tim Burton. I think this is the movie Tim Burton was born to make. I don't want to, psychoanalyze him or project anything on him, but he has never been the norm, even though he was maybe like very popular because of the Batman movies. And that's a sign, like the fact that he got a second Batman movie is like, oh, you're in it now. You're in the studio now, studio system. I can see him feeling like a novelty and like an outsider and kind of maybe waiting for that shoe to drop where like, are you gonna push me out too? Yeah. And so there's an affection for Ed Wood and for the outsiders and for the misfits that comes through that feels really personal, almost in the way that, while Glenn or Glenda wasn't about Ed Wood was like, I'm the man to make this movie. Like, Tim Burton's the man to make this movie. The thing he's appreciating about Ed Wood as a character is his enthusiasm and his just love of cinema and his belief in the magic of cinema and his belief in the idea of a star and like the history of Hollywood. And for somebody who was a relatively like young, kind of like groundbreaking, like filmmaker that nobody'd seen this sort of thing from before, he's so appreciative of the history. While it may not be the one that bears the highest number of like hallmarks of Tim Burton, it's probably his most Tim Burton-y movie he would ever make.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, and I would actually say, of the movies that are made about movies, I would still say this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
The fact that even in Ed Wood, it calls back to Orson Welles and Orson Welles' story of being someone who was seen as this auteur that made amazing films. And then basically the studio system just hacked up his later movies and eventually just pushed him out altogether.
That's really interesting to have Orson Welles as a character kind of at the peak of Orson Welles' fame with the knowledge of what Orson Welles became later.
Right. And also not only his fame, but he in Ed Wood is dealing with what you do with that fame because you are being asked to compromise so much.
What you working on?
Well, the financing just fell through for the third time on Don Quixote.
Do you know, I can't believe it. That sounds just exactly like my problems.
It's the damn money men. You never know who's a windbag and who's got the goods. And then they all think they're directors.
Ain't that the truth? Do you know that I've even had producers recut my movies?
I hate when that happens.
And they're always trying to cast their buddies. It doesn't even matter if they're right for the part.
Tell me about it. I'm supposed to do a thriller at Universal, but they want Charlton Heston to play a Mexican.
Ah, Mr. Wells. Is it all worth it?
It is when it works. You know, the one film of mine where I had total control, Kane. The studio hated it, but they didn't get to touch a frame. Ed,
Yes?
visions are worth fighting for. Why spend your life making someone else's dreams?
If you do see this as somewhat autobiographical of Tim Burton, it's kind of him wrestling with this idea of like, I am someone with a unique vision in this town. This is what this town does with people with unique visions. You know,
Right.
They'll let you make your movie as long as it makes them money. And if it doesn't make them money, then you're either pushed out entirely or you're relegated to play by their rules, which in a way is kind of what's
What
happened to
happened.
Tim Burton, because this movie he was able to make exactly how he wanted. And the reason he was able to make it the way he wanted was because he had a string of successes. Batman was a hit. This actually came out right after Nightmare Before Christmas, which was a surprise hit.
Which he didn't direct, but
He produced. But he was, in the moment, a hot director.
Yeah.
And then this movie didn't do very well. So it's really interesting to see this movie being sort of like, even at the moment, you know, as narcissistic as that might be, like seeing himself as kind of an Orson Welles character.
Yeah.
I don't know. It almost feels like an apology for like, hey, whatever happens next. This is just the way it happens in this
Yeah.
town, you know?
Yeah. I had a thought that this is kind of moving off of the Tim Burton sort of thing. So watching Johnny Depp in this, whether or not it's a performance anybody felt like they had seen from him at the time, I was just wondering, given who Johnny Depp is now and what you've seen him in the subsequent years, can you imagine Johnny Depp acting like that anymore?
No, well, with that level of optimism in the character.
And like energy.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like now all of his roles, he sort of feels like he needs to have at least a little bit of a swagger. And if he doesn't have that, it's not a role for him. And I'm not just talking about Jack Sparrow, although that is the only one that really comes to mind.
Well, yeah, it felt like that was a pretty big turning point for him. I don't know. As I was watching it, to the degree that it almost pulled me out of the experience, was like, man, this Johnny Depp was so versatile. He could commit so fully.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like in everything he's doing, he's Johnny Depp. So there's like a winking, I know I'm being funny, sort of cheeky, sort of, I'm Johnny Depp thing that just isn't there in Ed Wood.
Well, it's about how people have two personalities. The side they show to the world, and then the secret person they hide inside.
Like Jekyll and Hyde. I've always wanted to play Jekyll and Hyde. I'm looking forward to this production.
Well, your part's a little different. You're like the god that looks over all the characters and oversees everything.
I don't understand.
You control everyone's fate. You're like the puppet master.
So I pull the strings.
Yes, you pull the strings. Pull the strings. I like that.
Now, we're talking about acting in Ed Wood, and we haven't even mentioned
The guy
Martin
who won the
Landau,
Oscar. Yeah.
who is probably better at being Bela Lugosi than Bela Lugosi was. Because you watch Martin Landau like yelling, pull the string, and like acting, and I'm like, this is really good. Like if any of Ed Wood's movies had anything this good in it.
Yeah. What makes his performance so amazing is when I watch Ed Wood, like he's just Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's also a testament to the makeup.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not even thinking, which you usually do for an Oscar performance, I'm not even thinking, wow, Martin Landau's doing an amazing job. Right. I'm just thinking, that's Bela Lugosi. That's
right.
him, you know? And how I can't even the ones who really do immerse themselves in it, like people who play actual people, like for biopic type stuff, like who else gets to that level?
Right.
Where you're not even thinking about, wow, what an amazing performance. You're just... You've forgotten that even.
Right.
You know?
Not only is he incredible, I feel like the movie kind of comes to life once his character is in there.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is where my main interest is. He's got way more tragedy. There's something about Ed Wood's optimism that sort of is like any setback just doesn't really land as heavily. But like the phone calls from Bella are where it's like, ooh, this is like the vital stuff here.
Bella, what happened?
I didn't feel well.
Come on, let me get you to the hospital.
No hospital. Just take me to the couch.
Should I call a doctor?
No. This happens all the time.
It's what gives the movie any weight that it has. And it's a relatively light film, but there are moments with Bella that just kind of, and again, I think that might be what makes the movie a little bit of a cut above, where it's not just a hammy, fun look at Ed Wood and his career. It's sort of a reminder that this career had a lot of really tragic and kind of depraved things going on around it. And it adds a level of complexity where you could see Ed Wood being painted as a real hero and a completely optimistic, good person. Mm-hmm. And that relationship is one in which I don't think Ed Wood's heart is necessarily in the wrong place, but he's also kind of using this person to get what he needs out of it. And that's really, in the movie, it's kind of one of the few examples you see of his selfishness.
Yeah, it's basically its emotional core. But I don't know if the movie knows that. Because, I mean, obviously it has to continue after Bella's gone. But I just feel I kind of lose a little bit of interest, even like with the Orson Welles meeting and like the filming of Plan 9 from Outer Space. I just didn't feel as invested without Martin Landau and Bela Lugosi there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that might be my biggest thing with the whole movie is I feel like not only are you right that when Bella leaves, the interest starts to dwindle a little bit, but also I just don't even know that the movie knows how to wrap things up.
Right.
Like, I'll give it credit that it's not a typical biopic. You don't start with like Ed Wood's childhood and you don't end with like his death, which they certainly could have done. Right. It was a tragic death and that would have made for good movie making, but it knew better to just kind of stick with this little story about him making these movies sort of before he started going into just making like complete smut basically and dying of alcoholism.
Right.
But I feel like the movie just kind of fizzles at the end, and that might be where my enthusiasm for it drops every time I watch it.
Oh, geez, honey, I'm so happy for you.
Say, let's get round.
Huh?
Right now, let's go to Vegas.
But Eddie, it's pouring and the car top is stuck.
Boy, it's only a 5-hour drive, and it'll probably stop by the time we get to the desert. Heck, it'll probably stop by the time we get around the corner. Let's go.
They just kind of drive off, but that doesn't seem like a climactic moment because that relationship you were never all that into. You didn't care about that relationship all that much.
I kind of care more about what happened to Dolores because she was such a strong character and such a person that you have a lot of respect for. And it doesn't help that some of the postscripts for the people are like underwhelming themselves. Like Vampira unsuccessfully sued Elvira. All right.
I mean, that's the thing is what do you say? These are people that you've spent enough time in the movie with that you are curious.
Sure.
But your curiosity is almost tempered by the fact that, well, yeah, I guess they didn't really go on to do a whole lot.
Right.
And maybe that's kind of the point,
Maybe.
It's always foolish to kind of say this movie should have done this and I'm mad that it didn't do this. But it seemed like a movie that was interested in getting at least a little bit into the mentality and the mindset of, someone like Ed Wood. Like, what is it that makes them go? What is it that makes them tick? And I just think that a final scene, like something that would have just gone back to him as a character, instead of just ending with this weird, like him and a girl running off and getting married, and that just didn't seem accurate to anything in the movie.
Like, I don't know if this would have been, and again, we can't talk about a movie that wasn't made, but and if this would have been too cheesy, but ending with the actual last footage that Bella shot.
Yeah.
Or even just ending with the footage of Bella like picking a flower and smelling it and like of Martin Landau doing it, I feel like that's a really like poignant scene. And the arc of Ed and other characters could have kind of gotten back to that point. So it would have felt natural to show that again.
Yeah. With the level of admiration that Ed Wood seemed to have, or at least Johnny Depp's character of Ed Wood seemed to have, of just like he was like blown away by just stock footage.
Right.
So you could have had like
just loved moving pictures.
So just having a scene of maybe him on his own alone rewatching that scene of Bella.
Which is kind of, it would somewhat like redeem it, or it would be an interesting way to end it. This thing that was like wedged into a movie, and now you're ending your movie with it.
Yeah.
Like, and you're actually able to make it a poignant thing.
Yeah, elevate it a little bit.
To say, like, one of the things that was Ed Wood's minor strengths was being able to take footage that's out of place and putting it into a story. And like doing that with that footage would have been special.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is we're going to recut Ed Wood.
We might. So we talked about at the end of the episode, coming back to this question, and I'm wrestling with it. What do you think is the last great or good Tim Burton movie?
Well, I'm going to pull up the
old list.
The old list, because maybe I'm forgetting something.
Let me tell you, I don't think you are.
It's hard to say because Beetlejuice 2 has been announced.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, you see Tim Burton's working on Beetlejuice 2.
Right.
Initial feelings.
Initial feelings are, I hope he rewatches his old stuff and finds whatever it was, that creative spark that caused the great Tim Burton to make these amazing, quirky movies that are super memorable. But what I'm thinking is more likely going to happen is he's going to apply his later aesthetic to Beetlejuice and ruin everything forever.
So just one or the other, optimistic or pessimistic?
I am pessimistic, hoping to be surprised.
Okay, so
I'm
cautiously pessimistic.
Yes, there's still time for Tim Burton to be redeemed.
Sure, definitely.
Okay, looking over the list, last movie that I would say was I really loved this Tim Burton movie was probably 2003 with Big Fish. A lot of people don't like that movie. I still like it. And that was in a moment where, to me, Big Fish was Tim Burton trying something new.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like a different side of Tim Burton. He's kind of, branching out of the gothic thing a little bit. There's some brighter colors in this thing. Mm-hmm. And then he immediately followed that up with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I just thought it was awful. And nothing since, really.
I mean, we both we both liked Sweeney Todd, but not enough to say that it was
not great. No.
I'm in a weird sort of position where I would say Big Fish is probably his last good movie, but I don't really like it. I don't really feel like watching it again. I thought Corpse Bride was good.
Yeah, but it was kind of forgettable.
Right. I don't remember what the plot is. Yeah, probably Big Fish, even though I don't really like it, which is too bad. Because then for me, it would go,
well,
Ed Wood. If I don't say Big Fish, then I say Ed Wood's his last good movie.
Yeah, because you never saw Mars Attacks.
I didn't. I saw Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, and that was one that I liked. Okay, it has the folk legend going for it.
Right.
That's like, it's not just that it's a Tim Burton movie; it's the story of Sleepy Hollow. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe more the selling
legend,
point.
You could even say.
Yeah. Did you mention Big Eyes?
Oh, I saw Big Eyes.
And you didn't like it.
I did not like it at all.
I didn't even see it.
I was like, okay, Tim Burton's making a movie that's kind of straight. It's not doing his. It's not going to be CGI'd like crazy.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem.
Johnny
too.
Depp's not in it.
Yeah.
Christoph Waltz.
Yeah.
Amy Adams. I'm like, this could be good.
It
was not good. There was just nothing to it.
Something that I loved about watching early Tim Burton, and I think it's what really got me into him as a kid, was because of that practicality to the special effects and because of these worlds that he would create, they made going to his movies really fun. There could have been like all sorts of weird flaws in the script or someone who was casted weird. Didn't matter because it just had this world to it that you were just like, this is just something cool about this. Something really awesome about just living in this world that he's created for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you get that with Ed Wood even a little bit, I think, because of the feeling he's giving you about Hollywood. It's his version of Hollywood. Even Big Fish, he still was doing that world creating, and he was creating these movies that were they were Tim Burton movies. They were movies that had a lot of character to them. And once the CGI entered in, it was just, the character was just flat.
Mm-hmm. It's so much more compelling to see practical effects, even if it's not doing as crazy stuff as CGI. That like the fact that they created those topiaries in Edward Scissorhands and the camera's like moving around them, to say like, how did they do that? And there's like a big story to that. Like, oh, they had problems with this, so they had to do this or whatever. Like that's so much more fascinating than computers.
Yeah.
Even though you can show us anything and you can show it as realistically as possible, it's never as compelling as just like, wow, they did stop motion to make that happen.
And with practical effects, there's a certain type of artifice that's there that just is sort of like the cozy reminder that you're watching a movie.
The analog, like the comfort of analog. David Fincher, speaking of filmmaking, said that everybody knows you can do anything. So it's what you don't do that makes a difference. And he uses CGI. Some of the advancements in CGI have been developed for David Fincher movies. He got his start in visual effects. Like, he's not somebody who shies away from that. But it's what he doesn't do with CGI that's so important. And so he'll do shots like the overhead car shots in Zodiac that are clearly CGI, but are just a really interesting way to kind of do what he's doing and show the movement and everything.
Yeah.
Or to make the Winklevoss twins, you know, in Social Network. And he'll do it to do something that you couldn't possibly do without it. And do it in a really purposeful way to kind of keep that magic of how did they do that?
Yeah.
And even when the answer is computers, it's like, okay, but still, how did they
cool.
do that?
Yeah.
Like the Winklevoss twins, it's like, oh, they did computers, but it's like two different guys played him. They just put the other guy's face on him. And you're like, how'd that work? Why did it work so well that I have no idea that was what was happening? Like,
yeah. Those are also ultimately for the movie. Those are to smaller purposes.
Yeah.
They're not to make the movie look bigger. You know, like when you think of Alice in Wonderland or Charlie and Chocolate Factory, I'm assuming Dumbo, though I haven't seen it. The CGI that's just splooged all over the place to me is like just basically like, how big can we make this movie look?
Yeah. Which is kind of sad because Ed Wood is so analog and such a
celebration
of
it. Yeah. I genuinely wonder what happened to that Tim Burton. The one that loved the ethos of Ed Wood.
Maybe it's just tiring.
Maybe. We're not even saying, I mean, maybe people are hearing it this way, but I don't think we're saying practical effects equals good, CGI equals bad. We could name you a ton of movies that we love that use a lot of CGI. I mean, you just mentioned all the Fincher stuff as well. It just seems like you should do what services the movie. Right. And I feel like he's making these movies that it doesn't even service them. When I think Alice in Wonderland, I'm not thinking like CGI hugeness. I'm thinking like trippy weirdness. And I think practical effects are actually the better choice for that.
Yeah.
You know, Dumbo, when I saw the preview for that, it had that like digital, like mastering look to it.
Yeah.
It's not just CGI in the sense of like, we need to make this elephant talk, so let's do it through computers.
I mean,
I don't have a problem with that.
It looks like the whole, like I imagine the whole thing was filmed in front of a green screen.
Right.
That like, there's no crowd at the circus.
Yeah.
And like,
stuff that you could actually just easily film. It just becomes easy and
cheaper,
more convenient.
Probably cheaper nowadays. I don't know. That's speculation. Well, all right. So this turned sad.
Well, you asked.
The celebration of Ed Wood.
So going back to Ed Wood, we kind of talked about what we liked about it. We talked about maybe how the ending was something that made the movie seem like it's, as you watch it, its impact diminishes a little bit. It seems like the more you watch it. Other than that, though, are there other things that you think might contribute to why the movie doesn't hold up for you maybe as well the more you watch it?
There's something, I don't know if I've articulated it at all or if I could even put my finger on it, but there's just something about Ed Wood as a character that I'm not all that invested in. As much as what I think we've said about it is true, that it's a real like celebration of him and has a real admiration for him, I just don't think it translates into a character that I'm really rooting for all that much because he really does make bad movies. Do you buy into the whole so bad it's good thing?
Yeah, I can. I mean, but I think we're talking about two different things.
Maybe.
You're saying good as in like it's so bad that it eventually actually becomes a quality good movie. And I don't necessarily say that. What I say is there is a certain type of bad that makes it a very enjoyable movie on a level that the creator did not intend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what I mean because you don't agree with me.
I don't. No, I don't.
But,
I don't like that. I mean, I don't dislike the idea. I've just never been. I've never.
And it for me, it goes back even to just I can't. It's hard to explain other than that I know it to be true in me because it's happened. Like me and my buddies would go to the movie store and we would get the bad horror movies like the Ice Cream Man and these I forget some of the other ones. I mean, even like Leprechaun.
Mm-hmm.
These movies that whoever made them. You know, they meant for them to be scary, I guess, but you'd watch it and they just made us laugh. You know, the good was in the experience of watching it. Is it a good movie? You know, no, it's not. To me, like that's what becomes the point of the movie. And I was going to ask you, and I can't believe it took us this long to do it. Have you actually ever seen an Ed Wood movie?
No.
Okay, so I've seen Glen or Glenda, and I've seen Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about Ed Wood is once you know that he was selected as the worst director of all time, you have that knowledge and you watch it and you're like, not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, my wife, she actually kind of liked Glen or Glenda.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of what Tim Burton saw in Ed Wood too, is that you could make these terrible movies, but for whatever reason, they were memorable. And so that takes some skill. That's a long answer to your question.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this. If it hasn't been on the podcast, we've talked about it.
Well, this is the
before.
right time to talk about it, though.
Yeah.
You know,
it could just entirely be able to be chalked up to the fact that I just don't enjoy things. I'm bad at like enjoying life. That I take things too seriously.
Well, but you know what? We had this experience. We saw the Expendables together, and eventually we just had to laugh at it.
That's true.
You know? I wouldn't even put that into the camp of like, it's so bad, it's good.
No, it's just a bad movie.
It's just a bad movie. Did we have a good time watching it? It wasn't bad.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me taking things too seriously and I need to figure out how to lighten up.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think you don't need to change your feeling on it. I wouldn't say this is something you need to curate in yourself.
Yeah. And I don't even know how you could at this point.
Like, I'm not saying, here's my top 5 so good they're bad movies. Go
so
home.
So bad they're good.
Or so bad they're good. Yeah. Go home, watch these. If you're not a convert after watching these, I don't know what to tell you. You know,
especially because I would probably just be watching them alone.
Well, that doesn't work
fun.
Either. Yeah, exactly. That does not work. But I can see why you're not buying into the Ed Wood character because he's just making bad movies.
Right.
You know? Does that feel conclusive?
I think so, yeah.
Well, we can't conclude just yet.
No.
Because we do need to bring up that in our last episode previewing this movie, we had a running gag. Let me tell you something that IMDb trivia doesn't talk about.
Yeah. We so what's his name? Jeffrey Jones
Jeffrey
is
Jones.
The actor's name who plays Criswell, and we just talked tongue in cheek about how much.
Hey, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm on tape saying Jeffrey Jones, love that guy.
Yeah, you did say that.
I loved him as principal of Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Pretty much, yeah. You were talking about that one specific performance.
Yes.
And again, as we've done in the past, part of the joke was we forgot about this person or we forgot about this concept, so we act like
we
were big fans. Then we got word that
from a loyal listener,
and
who brought to our attention that we don't need to get too into this.
No, but Jeffrey Jones is a sex offender,
right?
And we were not aware of that. I didn't even
not at all. Again, IMDb trivia
didn't cover that.
Leaves that out.
So we don't know how aware of that everybody else was.
This one listener was the only person to bring that to our attention. So
and very quickly,
right? So we just need to make it clear that when we say we love Jeffrey Jones, really, I don't know Jeffrey Jones.
We had forgotten who he was. We forgot
that was the joke
in the movie.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we were not making light of what he had done.
We need to make that very clear.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about we go to what IMDb trivia did tell us, and maybe this is going to be a running thing. Maybe we do this every episode. But most irrelevant IMDb trivia.
Okay, I like
for
this.
Ed Wood.
I like this.
The one that I'm going to pick for this is the one that says, and I quote, "In the scene where Ed is frantically typing a script and begging Bunny Breckenridge on the phone to get him some transsexuals, he spends more time separating jammed type bars inside the machine than actually typing.
Ooh.
This was a very common annoyance with aging portable typewriters. However,
Do you know that?
hang on.
Okay.
However, this may also be due to the format of writing screenplays." End of trivia.
Well, there's a lot of information.
So there's
in
a
there,
lot
yeah.
of information and a lot of reasons I love that as terrible trivia. One, way too much information,
Right.
very specific information, but also not conclusive at all, saying it was a common annoyance, but it also may be due to the format of writing screenplays. And not only is it not conclusive, I have no idea why the format of writing screenplays would make typewriter keys jam more frequently.
Than other forms of writing.
Right. So that is, for me, the most irrelevant IMDb trivia regarding Ed Wood.
I like it. That's a good choice.
Thank you.
Are you going to give me a chance to do an IMDb?
Oh,
trivia?
you're going to pick your own? Okay.
Well, I don't know.
I thought this
don't-
was
we don't
Ryan's
have to.
IMDb
Oh, okay,
irrelevant.
okay.
No. I want to
We
hear
can cut
yours.
it. We
I
can
want
cut
to
it.
hear yours. I want to hear yours.
It's okay. My piece of trivia has to do with the screenplay as well.
Oh,
actually.
interesting.
So it is that Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, I think is
Sure.
how we say it. The screenwriters
Yeah.
wrote the screenplay in 6 weeks.
Wow. That
I
a
think
long
that's
time?
like an average.
It feels like
feels
if you're
like a very,
professional
like-
screenwriter.
yeah.
That's pretty standard.
That doesn't seem underwhelming or overwhelming
Or trivial.
or true.
It's like outside trivial. It's not even.
It's like conversation. Hey, how long did it take you to write Ed Wood? They'd say like 6
6
weeks.
weeks.
Oh, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Every day working on it? Off and on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Took a few breaks, worked on some other scripts. Took about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's your job, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I like this segment. This
Okay.
is fun.
Good.
All right. Star rating, though. Let's go back to
Star
that.
rating.
Oh, I mean, are we best buds? Because I feel like you kind of like this movie less than I do.
Well, I think I do. But I feel like you're right that this is not 3 stars. So I think I think I've got to go 3.5 on
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that even though I don't think that we're coming at it the right way, and I don't know that we are best buds, I think I'm gonna also do 3.5.
It's a weird thing. It feels like same star rating, but we don't see eye to eye.
Right. I don't think our criteria for that 3.5 is the same. I mean, I don't think it's like tense or anything right now.
No.
I don't think it's not necessarily. Well, you're kind of giving me a look now.
No, it's fine.
All right.
Mutual understanding. I think
Mutual
is
understanding
where
is,
we are.
yeah, it's not complicated.
No, we're not at odds here.
Yeah. When you get in this 3.5 range,
Yeah.
it's a very muddy area.
It is, yeah. In the spirit of the season, we will say that this is a mutual understanding.
All right.
And I respect the way you celebrate the holidays.
Mm-hmm. And
I
you
think
celebrate
you
in your way.
Right.
I think that's fine. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up another.
Yeah. Holiday Spooktacular. Yeah. We didn't even talk about our costumes.
No.
We did a theme costume this year. Nate and I are.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Well, so that we both came as Simon. You know, that's the problem. We
That's
didn't really
true.
work out who was going to
The
be
theme
who.
was Simon and Garfunkel. And we both
Showed
dressed
up
as Paul Simon.
Yeah. So that's a little embarrassing, but
But we're different eras.
that's true.
I'm Bridge Over Troubled Waters,
Yeah.
Paul Simon. And Here Comes Ryman Simon,
Yeah.
Paul Simon.
Well, the funny thing is, I don't
That's
really
not
know
even-
that much about Paul Simon, so
Oh.
so I just kind of
You
did a
just-
Google image search, and so yeah,
That
what
was
was it
the
again? Because I don't really know.
Here Comes
Ryman
Ryman Simon.
Simon. Yeah, that's my era.
Yeah.
Maybe next year we'll do the Garfunkel.
Yeah, that could be.
Do,
we could both be
yeah.
Garfunkel.
Yeah,
I'll be
you'll be Bridge
I'll be-
Over Troubled Water Garfunkel,
and you'll be
like actor.
actor. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm looking forward to this.
yeah, so like
So-
carnal knowledge, Art Garfunkel
Right,
for
bad
you.
timing. Yeah,
And I'll be. I might go. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and
yeah,
thyme. Garfunkel.
yeah,
I think I already have those clothes.
yeah. But yeah, send us pictures of your Paul Simon Halloween costume. We'd love to see it.
The hot costume this year.
All right. Well, with that said, and we don't need to change out of these clothes. We'll keep them on, but let's talk about our next episode of Can We Still Be Friends?
Mm-hmm. Well, for our next episode, we're looking to the month of November, and instead of doing an anniversary or anything like that, we're doing a tie-in to a November release, and the movie's called what? Won't You Be My Neighbor? Is that what it's called? The Mr. Rogers movie.
Won't You Be My Neighbor? Now, being an avid Mr. Rogers enthusiast,
yes.
Are you looking forward to this?
Now, let me say, everybody loved the documentary.
I cried.
Okay.
Did you see it?
I did. I think I maybe got a little choked up. I've been on the Mr. Rogers train for a bit. I should say.
You were into Mr. Rogers before it was cool to be in.
Well,
Mr.
no.
Rogers.
Here's the thing. I'm not even saying that. But thank you. As far as him being like the best person who has lived in our lifetimes, I've been there for a long time, and I knew all that stuff that he said that was so inspiring and so remarkable. And I had read that Esquire article that the movie is based on years ago. I mean, that came out in the 90s too. It's like the information was out there, folks. And so when the documentary came out and everybody was like, oh my gosh, Mr. Rogers, I was like, yeah, I know. Like, where have you been? And I guess I should just be grateful that everybody's like down with Mr. Rogers now. And I am. All that being said, I was skeptical of the movie because I don't need another Mr. Rogers. I have Mr. Rogers. And I saw the trailer on my phone and was like, I don't know if this is right. And then I saw the trailer in the movie theater. And I choked up. So
was it seeing Mr. Hanks as
he did something about seeing it like and really paying attention to it on the big screen made me think like he's going to do he seems to be doing a really good job with it. I have more hope for it than I did.
Okay. With all that said, though, Won't You Be My Neighbor is the documentary's name. That's not the name of the movie. The movie is called
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
So
okay,
just quick. I don't want another.
Good to know.
I don't want another Mr. Jones.
Oh my gosh.
Issue going on here. Let's just get it right.
And so the tie-in to the movie that we're going to be watching is that the success of the movie relies entirely on Tom Hanks' ability to pull off the performance.
Yes.
Now, Tom Hanks is sitting there listening to this, saying, how many times do I have to show you that I will pull it off? We've never talked to him. He has not reached out. But
no,
we have heard he's a fan of the podcast. Yeah. And he's not even speaking to us specifically. He is speaking to moviegoers. He is saying, when have I steered you wrong? When have I let you down?
Yeah.
And the answer is never.
Right.
So the movie that we've selected is another movie that without a pitch-perfect performance from Thomas Hanks,
is that his full name?
The movie fails.
Thomas?
Tom Ass Hanks.
Oh, Tom Ass Hanks, yes.
It doesn't succeed. And so this movie, I feel like 7 hours, is that right? 7 hours of just Tom Hanks.
Right. 7
glorious hours.
Sure, that's not a knock against it.
No.
Throw on 7 more.
And he did it. He pulled it off.
Right. Well, from what we remember. We need to rewatch.
Question mark remain. So, we're going to watch Castaway.
Yeah.
And we remember Tom Hanks pulling the whole movie together, making us care about a volleyball.
Right. Which the volleyball did its part.
Oh, it's the greatest.
We don't forget about that.
Greatest performance by sports equipment in a decade.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe the basketballs and Hoosiers. It's hard to say. But certainly I'm not remembering.
You've got the hockey pucks and slapstick.
Yeah, and Mighty Ducks.
That was a while.
Knuckle puck time.
Okay.
D2.
D2. You didn't say D2.
The knuckle puck in D2.
But the original knuckle puck, and I think this needs to be said, that was a street hockey puck. But the praise for Wilson the volleyball does nothing to take away from Tom Hanks' performance.
Yeah, right.
In Castaway. And so we said to each other, and then ourselves as we reflected on what the other had said to us, I wonder if Castaway is still as good. What is it? Directed by Robert Zemeckis?
Yeah. Robert Zemeckis, which we've never done a Zemeckis film. And I can't believe after, 77 episodes, I don't think we haven't done a Tom Hanks movie. Which is another thing I know he's thinking.
My fear is that he's just been listening, waiting for
this. Yeah.
And once he gets it, he's like, okay, another Everest conquered. You know?
So, watch Castaway with us.
That's right.
Find out what you think of Tom Hanks then compared to Tom Hanks as we will see him this month as Fred Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
And man, Tom Hanks has that's a huge filmography, so there should be lots of feedback on this one. Man, it's really hard to come up with a favorite Tom Hanks performance or movie.
Why would you?
But do it anyways. Give us that feedback. There's a lot of ways you can do that.
Yeah.
One of which is commenting on our website, canwestillbefriends.net. There's a lot of stuff you can kind of dig around on that website while you're there. We've got some episode archives that you can go through and go through 77 episodes worth of stuff. Our email address to send us an email if you'd like for feedback, is feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. And we've got some social media outlets that you can plug yourself into those outlets and give us your voltage. I'm making an electricity.
You could have
thing
stopped.
right
I
here.
think the metaphor worked,
and I took it too far. Now it's falling
kind of
apart.
short circuited. We've got Facebook.
Can We Still Be Friends podcast?
We've got Instagram.
Can We Still Be Friends pod?
Yeah,
It's different.
Drop the cast.
Yeah, and we've been dropping some goodies there.
We have been.
Little images.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's what you do on
behind
Instagram.
the scenes.
Yeah.
We're really revolutionizing the format of Instagram.
You're going to want to check out that
posting
Instagram.
Pictures.
But yeah, you can reach out to us anywhere there. You can also give us a phone call if you'd like, 847-306-9532. But we really want to hear from you. We want to hear what your thoughts on today's Holiday Spooktacular. And we're doing Castaway here in November. Will you be watching it with your family for Thanksgiving?
I feel like that's a dynamite Thanksgiving movie.
It could be. Any Tom Hanks is going to be a dynamite Thanksgiving movie.
Green Mile?
Any Tom Hanks. Road to Perdition.
It's going to be the month of Hanks.
I like that.
Can I
Wait,
say
Thanksgiving?
I know. Why did it take us that long to get there?
Thanksgiving.
That's another reason we're doing this movie.
It's the
month of
Thanksgiving.
thanks.
It's the month of thanks. Thanksgiving. We give thanks for thanks.
That's right. And it's our tagline for next episode.
That's right. Watch Castaway so you can give thanks for thanks. Watch Castaway.